Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here with us today. We are just going to sit for a moment while people log in. We're here with Nick Bushak today, the co-founder and CTO of GEM. Hey, Nick.
Hi, Ashley. Excited to be here.
Thank you so much for being here with us today. This is going to be great content, and we are really, really excited about going over these benchmarks and all of the information you're going to share with us today. So
Yeah,
while we wait,
yep.
oh, sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
I'm excited to be here and to share the benchmarks. Go ahead.
This is going to be a lot of fun. This will be a lot of fun. Well, while we wait, I'll just go ahead and go over how to use the questions. If anybody would like to ask Nick a question, all you have to do is open up the questions panel in your sidebar, and you can pop those over. We'll ask Nick anything that we can get through today. We'll do our best to get to everyone's questions. If we can't, we'll send those over after the webinar. Also, you're in listen-only mode. That means that you can hear us, but we cannot hear you. And please share. Use the R Daily hashtag. That's hashtag RDAILY and share all over social media. Your friends can still join. All right, it looks like we're doing good there, Nick. Okay, so just in case you're here by accident, you are looking at deciphering the data recruiting benchmarks for 2020. This is really cool information. And we have Nick Bushak here. And Nick, I'm going to go ahead and hand this over to you, let you introduce yourself. I think you'll do a much better job of that than I will.
Sounds good. Hi, everyone. Really excited to chat with you all for the next hour as I share GEM's 2020 Tech Recruiting Benchmarks Report, as well as some updated data points on how recruiting metrics have been affected by the coronavirus pandemic. I'll start off by really quickly introducing myself. I'm Nick, the co-founder and CTO of GEM. I manage GEM's engineering, product, and design teams. Prior to GEM, I spent 7 years at Facebook, where I led a few different product engineering teams. And throughout my career, I've been heavily involved in recruiting. As a hiring manager, I recognized that nurturing passive talent was incredibly important, but there was very little tech built out to help hiring managers and recruiting teams efficiently manage their cold outreach and track talent relationships over time. So my co-founder and I set out in 2017 to found GEM to solve those problems. At GEM, we built a sourcing automation product that automates a bunch of the manual, tedious work that goes into sourcing, including your follow-ups. We also have a talent CRM that gives recruiting teams full visibility into their pipelines, including metrics like pass-through rates and forecasting calculators. And we just launched a full funnel diversity analytics product, which helps talent acquisition teams gain unparalleled visibility into the diversity of their entire hiring funnel. We have over 300 customers using our platform today, and as a result, we're able to share this 2020 Tech Recruiting Benchmarks Guide. Today, I'm going to cover why benchmarking your recruiting funnel matters and how we calculated the metrics we're sharing today. Next, I'll walk through benchmarks related to outreach, followed by benchmarks for down funnel pass-through rates, slicing and dicing in a couple different ways. Finally, I'll wrap up with a live Q&A, so be sure to send in your questions as they come up. GEM created our 2020 benchmarking report using data from our database of over 1 million outreach emails and nearly 600,000 candidates who entered process. I'll cover some of the findings from our 2020 recruiting benchmarks report, but be sure to do a deeper dive into the report after the webinar. Before we jump into the benchmarks, I want to explore what benchmarking is and why it's important to recruiting. So to get a sense of what everyone on this webinar is currently doing or not doing with benchmarks, we've actually got a poll question. The question is, does your recruiting organization currently measure recruiting performance against benchmarks? And I believe Ashley will be sort of entering this in so everyone can vote. The options here are yes, we already use benchmarks. No, we have not used benchmarks. Or no, we don't, but would like to in the future. We'll keep this open for about a minute here for everyone to to vote.
It
And
looks like we
hopefully we'll
have
share the results.
lots of answers coming in. So when you're ready to
Great.
close, just let me know.
All right. Let's give it a few more seconds, and then just go ahead and close it.
Awesome. All right, I'll go ahead and hit close. And there are your results.
Awesome. It seems like we've actually got a pretty experienced crowd here, which is great. But also potentially, a few folks who might be interested in learning how to get started here. So hopefully the data here is going to be valuable for everyone that voted yes in terms of using benchmarks, in terms of just seeing some updated data. But we'll also try to cover how to kind of get started with using benchmarks as well. So with that, let's jump right in. Okay. So why sort of measure your recruiting funnel? So if you can't measure what you're doing, you won't know what's working for your team or for your prospects and candidates for that matter. Best-in-class talent teams are tracking metrics nowadays and using them to make data-driven decisions. Sources and recruiters use data to discover what outreach results in the most interested responses. Talent operations can get a bird's eye view of hiring across the board and shift strategies where needed. And hiring managers can see the health of their individual pipelines, understand where candidates are dropping off, and optimize their process based on data rather than gut instinct. And the entire team can know whether they're on track to hit their hiring goals. So why benchmark? This is the follow-up question because there's a difference between tracking internal metrics and benchmarking yourself against your competitors and peers. Most talent acquisition teams we know are using internal comparisons to understand their team's performance. So gauging success by the percentage of improvement over last quarter or year, for example. And of course, internal comparisons make sense. But ultimately, if you don't have a wider context for your recruiting data, you can't be confident about whether those numbers are objectively good. Benchmarking tells you the state of recruiting performance for your entire industry. It's how businesses learn hard truths about where they're underperforming, identify important trends, and uncover pain points they may have not known otherwise. With this intelligence, they can implement changes in behavior or strategy, or even justify investments in tools and resources to improve those elements of their hiring process that needed attention. So in that sense, benchmarks are a pretty vital place in asking valuable questions about your process. Here are some of the recruiting benchmarks that we're going to walk through today. Benchmarks can give you averages for all the metrics here, but you can also slice these numbers in a few different ways, including gender, department, location, and company size. Most of the numbers you'll see today are based on pre-quarantine data, but we've also got a few slides on the metrics since COVID really hit the US in mid-March, so you can see how some of these activities have temporarily shifted. The first set of benchmarks we'll look at today are around outreach. This is the very top of the recruiting funnel where you're sourcing candidates and sending them emails. At the very top of the recruiting funnel, the first thing to look at is how many people you're reaching out to or even opening your emails. So we took a look at average open rates across all of our customers by company size. There are actually two different takeaways here. The first is that 87% is an open rate worth aiming for. The second is that there is no direct correlation between open rates and company size. So if anything, smaller companies see better open rates across the board, but there's no clear pattern as company size increases. If you'd like to be seeing better open rates than you're seeing now, the two places to focus are send times and subject lines. At GEM, we've published a definitive guide for email outreach that breaks down send times by role, also using our own data. But you can also uncover your own best send times through A/B testing and trial and error. When it comes to subject lines, personalization will be your strongest strategy. Personalized subject lines increase open rates by 26%. But experiment too with appealing to curiosity or core values, asking questions in your subject lines, flattery, humor, or powerful verbs. Any of these, when done well, are likely to prompt more opens. On this slide, we've broken out open rates by company size and by role. To be clear, these are open rates for a 3-stage sequence. In other words, recipients opened at least one of the 3 emails that they were sent over a given period of time. At GEM, one of the reasons we recommend email sequences is that they significantly increase your chances of seeing a response. A 4-email sequence sees more than double response rates than a single email. So 35% compared to 15% with a single email. The other thing worth pointing out here is that the data for this benchmarking report was pulled at the end of 2019, way before we could have imagined where we are now. So I'm going to talk through these numbers first because they're the numbers we expect outreach to return to. But to prepare for this webinar, we also pulled some really interesting data from the last month's worth of outreach. And so, and actually, beyond the last month, the last few months, and I'll share what outreach stats have looked like during COVID in a moment. So while they don't necessarily see higher open rates, companies with 1,000 plus full-time employees see significantly higher response rates overall. In fact, the data suggests that for most roles, there's a direct correlation between company size and response rates. Maybe this isn't surprising, and of course you could come up with theories about it. The perceived risk of smaller startups, the fact that larger companies have more brand recognition, or that recruiters at larger companies have more collateral to point to. What this ultimately suggests is that smaller companies will have to work harder in their messaging once talent opens those emails. So get creative with your outreach. Work on your company brand and your talent brand wherever and however possible. And of course, know that you'll probably have to work even harder to get a response for your technical roles than you do for your biz roles. Again, I'll give you a moment to take this in. One thing you might notice is that product and design roles see the highest average response rates. On the other hand, and probably unsurprisingly, engineering and data roles see the lowest average response rates. The benchmarks we're showing on this presentation are just that, benchmarks. But we realize recruiting and the entire world are facing unusual circumstances right now, and these numbers might temporarily look different. To see just how much the current climate has affected recruiting activities, we analyzed the 90 days prior to most of the United States implementing some sort of shelter in place to the 90 days after to get the numbers you'll see on the upcoming slides. But first, another poll question. And the question here is your recruiting team building pipeline right now? Yes or no? I think we're just getting that added in here. I see, there we go.
We've got lots of answers coming in, so whenever you're ready to close this, just let me know and I will.
Great. Yeah, let's go ahead and close it. I think generally about 1 or 2 minutes is fine. Everyone's being pretty responsive, so.
Okay, there you are.
All right, a full 90%. Yeah, that's really cool to see. That's definitely the case for us at GEM as well. And actually, we ran a similar webinar a little bit earlier, and it's actually really cool to see these results change. I think we saw about like 70-30 really early into shelter in place. And so it's really interesting to see that bounce back since then. So, we're at 90% now, which is great. Now let me go ahead and jump back in. All right, so what have we seen on our end in terms of outreach metrics? So across the board, we're seeing that talent teams are sending fewer outreach emails right now. So since mid-March, recruiter outreach is down nearly 20%. What's interesting is that we analyzed this data back in April, just looking at the effects of COVID from mid-March to mid-April. And at that point, recruiting outreach was down nearly 50%, but now it's only 20%. So one theory here is when COVID first hit the US, there was a holding period in which everyone paused hiring plans while they waited to see how COVID would affect their business plans. As time has passed, talent acquisitions teams have solidified their hiring plans for the year and are back to doing reach outs. They're still at a lower volume. The greatest drop in outreach that we've seen was actually for sales, success, and business roles, which saw a 55% average drop across the board. And this includes GEM's international customers. Outreach for engineering roles in the US, on the other hand, dropped 18%. On the other hand, reply rates went up, across the board. So when we sliced the data by role and by location, nearly every category saw an increase in reply rates. Here are some roles that have seen pretty good reply rates since March. Sales, success, and business roles have seen a 20% increase in reply rates from March to June, and engineering roles saw a 14% increase in reply rates. And reply rates for product and design roles were up 9% on average. All of this suggests that while a lot of companies are having to freeze hiring or cut back on open roles, talent is looking to keep their options open. At GEM,
Hey,
while
Nick,
we scaled, yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. It looks like we have a poll slide still up, and I just wanted to
Oh,
make
weird.
sure.
Yeah,
Yeah,
let me disconnect and try to reconnect there.
there you
Is
go.
this working? Okay, cool. It must have.
Yes,
All right.
it must have frozen. Thank you.
Let's see. Yep. Great. Let me hop back in here. Sorry about that, folks. So um, yeah, this is kind of like a look at reply rates, during COVID. And so at GEM, while we've scaled back some hiring due to the coronavirus, we're actually leaving certain roles open and optimizing our recruiting efforts on top tier talent. Essentially to try to, given that we're seeing sort of an increase in reply rates, we suspect that it's actually easier to find top tier talent now versus at other times. So while not every company can keep recruiting at full steam, throughout this pandemic, the data shows that if you can at least keep some roles open, you'll have a better shot at some of the historically most in-demand talent. So that covers sort of our deep dive into COVID outreach, and feel free to shoot any questions in via the Q&A if you have any questions there, and we'll get to it soon. So I want to now jump into pass-through benchmarks. So your outreach, if done well, gets folks at the top of the funnel into process. So what metrics do you use to track them once they've responded as interested? At GEM, we call this signal of interest, and candidates passing an application review that provides a first filter prior to phone screen, entering process. Pass-through rates, also known as conversion rates, let you analyze the overall health of your funnel and observe where you're experiencing bottlenecks in the form of candidate drop-offs. The recruitment funnel begins with talent sourcing, which is the top of the funnel, and ends with a sign to offer, which is the bottom of the funnel as we refer to it here. Now, talent acquisition teams have any number of stages in their hiring funnel, but we looked at 5 for this report: entering process, phone screen, on-site, offer extend, and offer accept. Pass-through rates allow you to understand the health of your overall funnel. With GEM, you can use the data about your funnel to predict the outcomes of roles. So now you can answer questions like, how many candidates will we need to at each stage of the funnel in order to hire 25 product managers based on historic conversion rates? Here's how it looks in our product. We can see that if we keep pass-through rates the same as they've been in the past, we have to reach out to 10,000 people to hit our goal of 25 hires this quarter. We can get some additional insights by playing with the calculator. If we somehow increase our offer accept rate from 55% to 70%, for example, we'd be able to see that we'd only have to reach out to 7,000 people to hit our goal. Here's what the funnel looks like for aggregate pass-through rates. You'll notice that there are 2 different sets of numbers here: pass-through rates from the very beginning and pass-through rates from the previous stage. So the pass-through rates from the previous stage are the ones in the little circles between the stages. hope that makes sense to everyone. Taking a look at pass-through rates from phone screen to on-site, if you're far off from 40% in either direction, it may mean either that you need to be more selective in your screening process, otherwise you're ultimately taking up precious interviewer time, or that you're being too selective, so not enough candidates are making it on-site. If you want to work on this number, one idea is to take a hard look at your screening process. Is it asking the questions that are getting you true insights into the candidate and their ability to take on this role? Or is your hiring manager's list of qualifications too rigorous? Looking at phone screen to offer extend, we found that 50% of on-sites lead to an offer extend. So as with phone screens, if you want to work on this number, determine if interviewers are being too rigorous or too generous in their evaluations. Maybe recruiters and hiring managers aren't aligned on hiring criteria, or there's poor communication between both parties. Calibrating on ideal responses for each interview question is an integral part of ensuring that all interviewers are aligned on candidate qualifications. Mapping the reasons for rejections at this stage will help alert you to broader patterns that can help you fine-tune your recruiting motion. If the problem is candidate quality, sit down with sourcers and review your screening process. If candidates are choosing to withdraw after on-sites, look into the interview experience and hold hiring managers and interview panelists accountable. Now, from phone screen to offer accept, if you're seeing a lower ratio than 75%, ask for honest feedback from candidates who rejected your offer. Withdrawal reasons can range from more competitive offers elsewhere to not effectively selling your company during the process. To candidates' perceptions of company culture, to inadequate follow-up after the offer was extended. So revisit your offer letter to verify that comp and benefits are on par with your industry. Digging into data from exit interviews, which are the reasons that employees ultimately leave your org, might also get you insights into what candidates may have perceived but couldn't articulate about your company well in process. So to get another sense of where folks are wanting to focus, let's do another poll. At what stage of the hiring funnel does your company have the most challenges? I'll give people, about 30 seconds to a minute here to respond. And then, yeah, let's go ahead and close it up and take a look at the results. All right, this is pretty interesting. Pre-interview to phone interview. Yeah, that's pretty fascinating, and it is also like a pretty good place to optimize because when you think about it in terms of the amount of candidates that pass through that part of the funnel, it's one of the highest volume parts of the funnel. So there you can make some pretty good progress there. That likely has like a very big impact on the rest of your interview funnel. The other thing that's pretty interesting about sort of the recruiting funnel is that things that your team does earlier in the funnel can also affect pass-through rates later in the funnel. So as an example, really qualifying people on that very first conversation to understand if they'd even eventually, once you made an offer, actually made the offer, that can actually have a ton of impact even on your offer accept rate down the line. So really interesting and cool to see. All right, I'm jumping back into the slides here. Let's see, Ashley, if you don't mind just letting me know, do you see pass-through rates by company size now?
Yes, you look great.
Great, okay, perfect. I'm glad that worked out this time around. All right, so So generally what we see here is that small companies invite fewer candidates on site than larger companies do. So 30% versus a 44% pass-through rate, but they tend to extend more offers. So a 48% versus a 45% pass-through rate. For larger companies, the story might be tickets from smaller companies and screen like a startup. On-site interviews are costly, especially for technical roles with panel interview time. So make sure the questions you ask during your phone screens get as much pertinent information as possible from the candidate. Hard skills and soft skills, intelligence and values, and so on. Make sure too that recruiters know what red flags to watch out for. Being more selective at the top of the funnel means better on-site to offer extend pass-through rates because you brought the right people in to begin with. And it's kind of cool that that this slide actually came after that vote. All right. So taking a look at offer accept rate by company size, basically what we're seeing here is the smallest companies have to work twice as hard to see as many offer accept. So yeah, why do I think this is? I think it's because smaller companies are a bigger risk. So they tend to see lower offer to accept rates. There are a number of ways to offset this risk, whether it's real or perceived. One involves improving the overall candidate experience. Use a combination of candidate surveys and best practices to determine where in the journey you could be serving your candidates better. Another area concerns employee value proposition. So your EVP is the unique set of benefits employees receive in return to their contributions to your company. One thing smaller companies can do is to clarify what their EVP is, especially if withdrawal data suggests that you're losing candidates to competitors. Finally, get candidates as excited about the role as you do about the company. Recent surveys from LinkedIn show that the things candidates most want to know about are their role's expectations and workload, what their personal career trajectory would look like, and what a day in the life entails. Ultimately, they want to be able to envision what a day-to-day experience would be like, tomorrow and 5 years from now, if they were to take on the role. So help them see that. We also broke down offer accept rates by company location. And this was also pretty interesting. New York headquartered companies appear to be more discerning at the top of the funnel and extend fewer offers. But they also see fewer offer accepts, which is interesting. Let's hone in on that offer data using pass-through rates from the beginning of process. The biggest takeaway is that it's much, much harder for San Francisco and New York-based companies to usher candidates through the end of the funnel. Companies in the other location category extend significantly more offers than those in New York and San Francisco, 75% versus 50% and 51% respectively. And candidates are more likely to accept those offers, 10% more likely than for San Francisco companies and over 20% more likely than for New York companies. This is really interesting data, and I actually, I'm not 100% sure how to explain the difference between New York and San Francisco, since they're both, fairly competitive in employment markets. It's easier to understand, the higher accept rate outside of these two markets, but New York is interesting. Part of it may be that there's potentially heavier hiring of biz roles in New York City, but it is this one's a little bit hard for me to explain. So this is something worth calling out in its own slide. Broadly speaking, there's a top of funnel problem when it comes to gender diversity in sourcing. Across our data, more than 2 times as many male candidates enter process as female candidates. Unfortunately, this data squares with other studies in the recruiting industry. LinkedIn's 2018 Gender Insights report, for example, found that recruiters, regardless of their own gender, are 13% less likely to click on a woman's profile when she shows up in a search. Although we don't have benchmarks to report on non-binary gender pass-through rates, I want to call out that it is important to GEM, both in how we do our own hiring and how we build our product, that we consider diversity. And so we hope to be able to report on non-binary benchmarks in the future. Meanwhile, I'd like to call out that if you are a GEM customer today, or are looking for a product to help you with diverse hiring initiatives, that GEM does help teams track and report on their success with top of funnel diversity sourcing. What's interesting though, and in fact really heartening, is that female candidates pass through subsequent stages at better rates. In other words, while fewer women are entering into process, the ones who do enter seem to outperform their male counterparts. The story this tells is that unconscious bias has the strongest impact on the gender gap in the stages before recruiters actually speak to candidates, sourcing and application review. Companies that care about diversity should spend more time nurturing diverse talent pools at the top of the funnel, and they should hold their teams accountable to reaching out to a diverse set of talent at the top of the funnel. At the very top of the funnel, one of the most valuable things you can do is put recruiters through an unconscious bias training. The data shows that unconscious bias exists even for URM and female-identified recruiters. Helping recruiters become aware of their own beliefs and assumptions might change the way they relate to female and non-binary profiles when they show up in searches. If your offer accept rates for female-identified talent are subpar, your most valuable asset may be internal data about candidate withdrawal or offer rejection reasons. You should be asking all candidates who withdraw from process to be honest about their reasons for doing so. But for female-identified candidates or other specific segments that you're digging deeper into, examining withdrawal reasons can be particularly insightful. So were they turned off by company culture? Did the comp package not meet their expectations? What investments might you need to make from more inclusive practices to increase female representation at the leadership level to increase the offer accept rate for female candidates? The last benchmark I'll show you today is pass-through rates by department. In the graph above, you'll see the total pass-through rates from entering process to offer accept. So in other words, 38 candidates have to enter process to make a single hire in data science, but for sales and customer success, only 12 people have to enter process to make a single hire. If benchmark suggests your struggle to fill a particular role is on par with the industry, start nurturing prospects and building for that role now. If your pass-through rates aren't on par, it's time for an internal examination of your people and processes to uncover why you're experiencing drop-offs that other competitors aren't. This actually was, these data were actually quite helpful for me when I was having a hard time hiring a designer. It helped me realize that it wasn't just me, and design is actually one of the hardest roles to hire for in this environment. So I'd like to quickly highlight how GEMS metrics can help you understand your recruiting funnel and build strategies to move the needle. GEMS outreach stats lets you track your outreach communications and see how they're faring. So you can view open rates, reply rates, and interested rates broken down by message content, talent pool, and even the recipient's gender to see how your messaging resonates with different populations over any given time period. Did your team kick off a targeted campaign 2 weeks ago? See how it's performing now. Is one source's outreach converting candidates at higher rates than others? Dig into their messaging to share tips with the rest of the team. You can also use outreach stats to manage your team's full top of funnel output. Outreach stats tracks the number of LinkedIn profiles viewed and the number of prospects added to GEM, as well as the number of prospects contacted, followed up with, and more for any given time period per recruiter. It's also possible to break these down by diversity. If you include links in your outreach messages through GEM, which we highly encourage as a way to showcase what's great about your company, you'll be able to track how prospects engage with that content. So link to that blog post written by your female head engineer, or to that article about your recent round of funding, or to a page about your core values, and then use content stats to discover what content compels prospects to click and which clicks lead to replies. All of this data will help you better inform your outreach strategy, not to mention help you control your talent brand. Whereas outreach stats allows you to analyze your team's full top of funnel activities, pipeline analytics, which is GEM's analytics product that's fully integrated with your applicant tracking system, pipeline analytics allows you to view your full funnel from initial outreach to hire. Pipeline Analytics combines all of GEM's outreach data with all of your applicant tracking system's candidate data in order to help you answer questions like how many offers accepted did a certain recruiter get in Q4? Or what are our pass-through rates from phone screen to onsite for software engineers in the Austin office since the beginning of the year? GEM has over 300 customers today who are using outreach stats, content stats, or pipeline analytics to help their teams. It's not unusual for us to hear comments from our customers like the one here. So before we get into Q&A, and thanks to all of you who have already written in with some great questions, we'll be getting to those in just a minute. I want to give you an easy way to request a personalized demo of GEM so that you can get any product questions answered and see how GEM might work for you and your teams. So again, I'll leave this one open for about 30 seconds or so. Once we've gotten once we've done that, I'll jump straight into the Q&A.
Thanks, Nick. And if anyone does have any additional questions, I see those, so I will ask Nick after the presentation.
Great.
Okay, are you good?
Yeah, let's close it.
All right. Okay, all closed.
Great.
So are you ready
all right.
for questions?
Yes, let's get started. So I've got one question, the first question here, which is, what are some tips for how we can source passive candidates with the new remote hiring environment? So, I think a lot of the mechanics in terms of sort of individual, recruiters working day to day, I don't expect to change too much. A lot of passive candidate sourcing, is pretty straightforward to do remotely because, essentially you're sending cold outreach and then getting on a phone call or a video chat for that initial call. But one of the challenges that we've heard from a lot of our customers as they've gone into like a fully remote role is having ways for teams to for the team to collaborate well together. I know within GEM it's definitely been a challenge across the entire team and also within the recruiting team. There are a number of different things you can do, from really basic things like, daily stand-ups with the recruiting team as a way to stay in touch and make sure everyone's on the same page. I'll put in a little bit of a sell for GEM here because I actually do think it helps with teams going remote. Because essentially, when you have all of your top of funnel outreach and all of your top of funnel work in one place for the entire team, it lets you just collaborate better on roles and sourcing. So, you can mention other recruiters or potentially even hiring managers within GEM to call attention to certain profiles and actually, comment on a certain candidate or the outreach strategy for them. You can organize your passive talent into projects, which you can then share across the team and sort of contribute to across the board. And it generally helps you, stay on the same page when, especially for things that in the past you might have had to do in person when the recruiting team was all in one place. So those are a few ideas. Great question.
Hey, Nick,
All
we
right,
have another.
Yeah.
If you'd like to go with that.
Yeah, let's go for it.
All right. So how do you anticipate COVID and WFH will affect hiring and process over the next 12 to 8 months? 12 to 18 months, sorry.
Yeah, so I think, we we talked a little bit about the data that we're seeing on our side, and obviously this is a crazy situation and it's very hard to predict. What we have seen so far in our data is, recruiter outreach was down by 50% immediately after shelter in place, because a lot of companies were just trying to see from a business standpoint how they were going to be affected, and they were being careful. They were just pausing hiring. And now outreach is only down about 20% from pre-COVID levels. So there has actually been a fairly fast recovery as businesses have just taken stock of how affected they are by COVID and work from home. So that's what we're seeing on our side, and I would say that I expect things to continue to recover, along those lines, especially if, for example, companies just start to get confident that there will be a fast recovery. We've seen with the stock market that it seems like that confidence is there, and I would expect that to trickle down to hiring as well. And it seems from our data that is the trend. It's been from 50% down to 20% down most recently, and I would actually expect that trend to continue. Things I think that we found a little bit harder at GEM in terms of hiring. It's a lot harder to for example, do nurturing events. Like in the past, if we were going to hold like an in-person event for prospective candidates, or inviting prospective candidates to happy hours at our office, as well as even just having coffee chats with prospective candidates, a lot of that is impossible anymore. You essentially have to use Zoom, and everyone is kind of has a bunch of Zoom fatigue. So I think the area that is probably most challenging, at least that we've seen, is in the closing portion of actually building that relationship and getting folks to accept offers. That being said, I don't think we've seen anything in our numbers that suggests that anything is like really out of whack in terms of pass-through rates across the funnel. I think that the main things that we've seen are changes on the outreach perspective, and companies just being a little bit more conservative. But we expect things to continue to trend well, given sort of how they've trended so far. I'm happy to go into more depth, if folks have any sort of follow-up questions there.
Thank you so much, Nick. That is fantastic information to have on hand as well. Are you ready for another question?
Yeah, let's go for another one.
All right. How do you reconcile a data-driven hiring strategy with the inherently gut-driven aspect of hiring?
Yeah. So I think there are definitely at least some companies in the talent space that that take or have some belief that eventually a lot of recruiting can just be done by AI, or candidate selection can be done by AI and things like that. But I think at GEM we hold the stance that recruiters are still really core to the process, and there is so much within recruiting that ultimately does have to be gut driven, especially if you have only a few data points and not enough data points to drive conclusions from data. But the way I think we view data is that it's a tool in your sort of arsenal as a recruiter. It can help you potentially identify biases that you have, and you can use the data to help you inform your recruiting process. The data isn't going to tell you, oh, there's something obviously wrong in this part of the process. It's not going to be able to tell you that you must do thing X differently in your recruiting process. But what it can tell you is it can uh, help you understand where to look, and the questions to ask yourself. And we actually, we believe, and a lot of our customers believe, that the more data that you have, the better you can run your recruiting team, and the more successful you can be as a team, because you just have more information to make informed decisions on.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Nick. And we have one more question. Are you ready?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Are there new salary benchmarks due to the pandemic? What is your view?
Yeah, we actually didn't look at that, and I'm actually not sure what the data says there. I think, typically at GEM, when we make offers, we rely on a few products that update every 6 months. But if I were to guess in terms of the impact of COVID, I would actually take some of the benchmarks on reply rates and sort of the changes in sort of the amount of demand for certain roles. And I'd expect that certain roles after COVID are less competitive in terms of the number of companies actively trying to hire those roles than certain other roles. And so if we were to see more salary softness, I would expect it to be in some of those roles where demand has decreased due to the coronavirus pandemic. But I wouldn't expect salary benchmarks to change super drastically, especially given that we're seeing such a fast recovery in terms of the number of recruiters actively sourcing for roles. So that's my take. Unfortunately, I don't have specific data there to verify that hunch.
Fantastic to have your viewpoint on that, though. Thank you so much. And if anyone has any additional questions, or if you think of anything after the session, please send that over to ashley@recruitingdaily.com and we'll send it directly to Nick. As long as that's good with you, Nick.
That sounds great. Yeah, happy to follow up and answer any other questions that come up after this.
Well, she said thank you, and that helps a ton.
Great.
Awesome. Well, this has been a really, really wonderful webinar. I think we're good. Are you good is there any other content that you'd like to discuss or go over today?
No. Yeah, thanks so much to everyone for attending. Hopefully you all found this information useful, and feel free to reach out to me afterwards. Happy to answer any questions on data or any other follow-up questions.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Nick. It was wonderful to have you here, and thanks to everyone for being here. Keep in touch and have a wonderful Wednesday. You're getting tons of thanks coming in, Nick, just so you know.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
All right. Have a wonderful day. Talk soon.
Bye.
Bye.